And we can think about what we're hoping to get out of this time together. And we try to think, may we do this not just for the fun, I hope, of a couple of hours, but may we do this with the intention of getting even more than that. And may everything we do in the next couple of hours help us directly or indirectly to deepen and broaden our motivation to be of benefit to all beings, and to deepen our correct understanding of how things exist and of how things work, so that we can accomplish that goal of being of best possible benefit to all beings. Okay, and so with that motivation, with that intention, we can chat. So I was so happy to hear that that some folks were able to get together last week to practice. How did that go?
It was great.
Yeah. Good.
We
Good.
got stuck quite a lot. I think we got some questions for you, actually. I don't know if anyone wrote them down or remembers them, but we definitely came into a few things we weren't sure about.
Sure. I'd be happy to hear it. We can think about it together. Does anybody remember what the questions were? Or any of them?
I think it was around process, like I'm going from memory, so please jump in and tell me if I've got it wrong, guys. But I was getting caught up in the process and the steps and your definitions before you then try and compare the two phenomenon. And it was around, well, actually, I think we went through a couple of examples and we got to the end and it's like, it's 4p, but then we were going back, oh no, actually it's 3. And it's like, we're just getting lost.
Okay, so like you mean definitions of the terms that you're comparing?
Yeah.
You start comparing them. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the cool things that the debate process highlights for us very soon, very, very quickly, is that we can't really have a coherent and what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word right now, but like almost like a reliable conversation with each other if we don't know what we're each talking about, right? And again, outside of this, like in our daily lives, I think we do it all the time. And so this is, I think, a really important thing that we get from this right away, is that we have to understand, wait, what are you referring to? What am I referring to? Let's agree. It's not that we have to agree. It's not that we have to agree that like the definition of justice is X, Y, and Z. It's just that we need to know, if you're saying justice, what are you talking about? Okay, I can agree to use the word justice for that for the sake of this conversation, or can we please use this other word instead? That's just a matter of convention. That doesn't matter terribly much, right? But we have to be clear on what we're talking about. And so indeed, when we do like a formal Tibetan debate, we usually would start by saying, okay, here's a word. Can you posit the definition of this word, right? And we would start from there, and then we would have the conversation from there. We'd figure out the implications together from there, right? Does that address what you're getting at? Yeah. The trick in learning something like this is always that we have to start from somewhere, and it only really all makes sense when we kind of have all of the pieces a little bit down, but we have to start from some end, you know? And so here we're starting from the end of comparisons of phenomena. We don't have the definition piece completely down yet, you know? So in the meantime, we're kind of doing it in like a Mickey Mouse kind of way, as they say, to get the idea of this component. And then later when we get that component, something like that, I think. Sorry, worldly concern, but I just keep getting distracted because my hair is a mess. Okay, whatever.
I turned my video off for that reason. Mine's off and I've just got the gallery of everyone else.
Oh, well. Any other questions lingering from last time or from the material we've covered so far?
I have one. In our little email back and forth, I don't have my camera on because I literally just woke up, didn't comb my hair or anything yet. But anyway, it was like the comparison between milk and water. Well, water is moist and wet, whereas milk is moist as well as wet.
Oh,
and
interesting.
we weren't sure about that. And I said, maybe it means that milk also has other qualities such as white and viscid and this and that. So meaning that there's both or as well means more than one other quality. We couldn't figure that one out quite. Do you have any idea?
Was that wording in the book, or was that wording something that came up in the conversation?
Someone found it in the book. I think maybe
It was in.
Andrew
So I'm just
found it
looking
in,
for it now.
If anybody finds it in the book, I'd be really curious to see it. But water is moist and wet.
and milk is moist as well as wet.
Milk is moist.
And that's different.
Well, so, I can say a few things. One thing I can say is that distinction, as far as I know, is not a distinction that comes from like the debate tradition itself,
Okay.
As far as I know. So if it's being used that way, if it's being distinguished that way in the book, then I'd have to ask Daniel Perdue, the author, like, how do you define and how do you define as well as? Because as far as I'm concerned, I would take them to be the same thing.
I know. I wish
Danny found it was a fantastic find that you found. There's some other text about collected topics. And it says colors debate number 9 is milk water. It said there is nothing posited as water's definition. It's not sign not established. It follows that there is something posited as water's definition. I accept, posit it. The subjects wet and moist. It follows that if it's wet and moist, it's pervaded by being water. I accept. It follows that the subject milk is water. No, the subject milk is not water because it's wet and also moist, but not wet and moist.
Is that how it ends?
Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
think it's like some kind of translation error or something? It's really weird.
At the very least, it's a translation difference, if nothing else. That's a different system of translation than I'm most familiar with. I'll put it that way. Yeah, that's very interesting. Furthermore, in the system that I'm familiar with, we would say that milk is water. So there's that on top of everything else. Milk is water because of being moist and wet.
right. And water has other properties too, such as usually transparent, but sometimes turgid, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. And I think that goes a little bit beyond the material we've covered so far, but it's because the word water, as it's being used when it's defined as moist and wet, isn't referring to H2O. It's referring to something else, right? So H2O is water, but it also contains several other things besides moist and wet, which is, I think, the point you're making, Danny. Yeah, that has to do with the 4 elements, and H2O contains all 4 of the elements. But that, I think that goes a little bit beyond, but I absolutely understand why there was confusion. what I'll say is, I mean, I'm sorry, it must have been frustrating. I wouldn't get hung up on that terminology right now.
Yeah.
Anything else that stood out?
Just a comment on that.
Mhm.
I just looked in a document from Nalanda. They had a course last winter, and there's a line: the subject cow's milk. It follows that it is water because it is wet and moistening.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be a little different.
And is that the conclusion they arrive at, or did they debate that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe both.
It's got to be the element though, doesn't it? Because it doesn't make sense unless it's the element of water they're referring to. So it's the element of water as opposed to
Yeah.
sand, which is the element of earth, even though sand's not earth strictly in the sense of you wouldn't, earth would be mud,
Right. I'm just thinking for a second here about what we want to say about this right now. Well, let me say this too. I think one thing that it's really good to be aware of is that we are in the very, very, very early stages of this being translated into English. Until like maybe 3 years ago, there were only like a couple of resources out there. And now more and more resources are coming out. And there's not like a centralized entity that is doing this. Like people are kind of doing it in a grassroots way, which is awesome. And because of that too, everybody's translating things in different ways, So I think it's really important when we're looking at different documents on the same thing to be careful not to get caught up if it seems like, wait, I thought I understood it, but now this is saying something else. So I guess I don't understand it. It's just important to check, like, what is the translation? What are they getting at? How are they defining things? Because sometimes they'll say things that might seem completely opposite to each other, and it's just because they're translating things in different ways. Right. But if you guys would like to send me those two specific resources to look at, I'd be happy to look at it. And next time I can give you whatever understanding I can get about that. Okay. I wanted to talk today about the materials in chapter 5. So let me just one last time ask, like, any other burning questions about the comparison of phenomena specifically, let's say. Okay. So again, I just wanted to always start by re-emphasizing two pitfalls to look out for. One is the difference between a term being used as a subject versus the term being used as a predicate. It doesn't come down to the same thing, I guess, right? Some things exist as subjects and don't exist as predicates. Some things exist as predicates and don't exist as subjects. Lots of things exist as both subjects and predicates, but might have different properties depending on whether it's being used as a subject or a predicate. Right now, I'm just kind of saying these things kind of categorically. It might sound a little cryptic, but over time, I think it will become clearer and clearer. For now, I think the important thing is to just be clear. Is this being used as a subject? Is it being used as a predicate? And so I just don't want to assume that it would like work the other way too. Yes, Jana.
I got this book and I'd like to know where in the book it has the chapter talking about when a subject can be used as an example of itself.
When a subject can be used as an example of itself. I have to look at the book again. I have it over there, but it's early on. It's early on. I think if I'm not mistaken, there's a chapter early on that's called something like subjects that exemplify themselves, and phenomena that exemplify themselves and phenomena that don't. I don't remember for sure exactly, but I can take a look at it later if you remind me and let you know. Okay. Okay, so reminders, again, when we're doing the comparison of phenomena in terms of how they compare to each other for possibilities and all of that, we're always comparing them as predicates, okay? And finally, again, the word is, or in the word are, and the word being, and the word like all of that, am, is always being used in the sense of exemplifies, not in the sense of is identical with, not in the sense of is mutually inclusive with, right? So if I say a pirate is a stock character in many media in the West, right? And all that means is that if I said, give me an example of a stock character in media in the West, you could fairly say pirate, and that would be like a fair thing to say. That's what the word is doing there. Does that make sense? Okay. So I wanted to review the material in chapter 5 because I think it can get confusing. And if I'm being frank, with all, like, I have the deepest respect, gratitude, appreciation, and admiration for Dan Perdue. And at the same time, I think sometimes he presents things in ways that are more confusing than they need to be. And I have come to suspect that he does it on purpose, right? I can't promise you what the reason is. I have a theory. My theory is that I think if he forces you to always be thinking, you can't ever just kind of take it in. But I very strongly also think that some of this is not as difficult as it comes across. In the other book, in the Debate in Tibetan Buddhism book, much more so still. But anyway, so let me review the points that I think are most crucial to understand in chapter 5. And to be honest, I'll also be pointing out some things that I wouldn't have thought of as crucial, but just to undo any confusion that might have come given that they were raised, okay? So crucial, two kinds of statement, right? That is crucial. Statements of qualities, statements of pervasion. They are two different things. They are doing two different things. Statements of qualities, what they're doing is they're assigning a predicate to a subject. They're connecting a predicate and a subject, right? We'll get to in a later chapter, like there's two categories of like ways that a predicate could be being related to a subject, right? It could be either, again, you don't have to worry too much about this right now, but like it could be either that we're saying that something is something else, or that we're saying that something exists relative to something else. So it's either going to be being or existence. We don't have to worry about that now, but I'm just saying that because given that, aside from that, it doesn't matter what verb you use to connect them. We don't want to get hung up on that. Like whether we're saying is, are, am, were, was, is, being. The point is the verb, the copula, as we call it in English, doesn't matter. What matters is that we're saying something about how these two things relate to each other, right? Whatever verb we're using when we're saying is, or any variation of that, we're saying that the subject exemplifies this predicate in a statement of quality. All right. Statements of pervasion are talking about both things as predicates. So a statement of quality would be, my dog is cute, right? The subject is my dog, cute is the predicate, and the truth has been spoken. Statements of pervasion would be something like, whatever is blank is necessarily blank, right? In regular English, we say this in a million different ways, as Dan Perdue points out. But I like to keep it simple in debate and just settle on one way to say it. And the way that I like, just because it's the way that Dan Perdue uses most commonly, is whatever is blank is necessarily blank. So whatever is a tree is necessarily a vegetable, not in the culinary sense, but in the biological sense, right? Whatever whatever is a human being necessarily, whatever is a living human being necessarily has a brain, right? Notice there I said has, right? There I said has, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What I'm saying is whatever is a human being necessarily is a being with a brain, right? A brain haver, right? Was somebody about to ask a question or point something out?
I have a quick one. What was the sentence you said about pervasion relates to?
Statements of pervasion are relating to things as predicates.
Thanks.
Right? So if you think about what do I mean by that, notice this is built into the phrasing, which is why I like this phrasing so much also, because it makes it very clear in the phrasing. When I say whatever is a tree necessarily is a vegetable, right? I'm not making a statement about tree. I'm making a statement about whatever is a tree. Whatever is like, meaning I'm not giving you a subject. Whatever, what's the subject? Whatever is a tree necessarily is a vegetable, meaning any subject you posit, if it has tree as a predicate, then it has vegetable as a predicate.
Can I repeat that back to you to make sure I understand it?
Yes, please.
So what if I was to word it this way? Whatever can be considered a tree is necessarily also a vegetable. It makes sense. This is the same thing, right?
Yep.
So whatever subject it is, which we can agree to call the tree, has to be a vegetable because trees are vegetables.
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. Whatever subject it is that we can agree to call a tree, we can tell you right now that we'll also be able to agree to call it a vegetable.
Okay, I've got it.
Right? Yeah. Linda?
Would it also be the same to say whatever has the quality of a tree, it is also a vegetable?
Yes, asterisk. It's like for all practical purposes in our lives right now, yes. The one asterisk is that if the thing we're talking about is a non-existent, if it's something that doesn't exist, then we wouldn't say that it has a quality, right? That's why I keep saying exemplifies, because I'm just trying to be inclusive of non-existence as well, you know. We want equal representation for non-existence as well. So so we could say, you know, Thor is a mythological, well, we could certainly say Thor is a non-existent. Thor is a non-existent, right? But we couldn't say Thor has the quality of being a non-existent just because we couldn't say that Thor has any qualities, given that Thor doesn't exist. But you get the idea, though, that's for sure. Well, what you said to me is an instance of having gotten the idea.
If we took that example and used it to repeat what you said earlier, we could say whatever, hang on a second.
Sure.
Whatever God can be considered Thor is necessarily also a mythological God, or like whatever being, whatever non-existent being can be labeled Thor, is necessarily also a mythological god? This is pervasion, right?
Yes, yes. Here's how you would say that.
Yeah.
I think the simplest way of saying that would be whatever is Thor is necessarily a mythical god. However, we couldn't say that. I mean, that again, that shows me that you got the idea. And for practical purposes, we couldn't say that because there isn't anything that is Thor. So we wouldn't say that.
So in a debate, that wouldn't run very far because of that.
Exactly. Or, you'd be proven wrong basically very quickly, which is fine, but that's the idea. Whatever is Louis XVI is necessarily a past king of France that was beheaded, right? That we can say. Louis XVI, yes, that we can say. So notice we can say, and that's actually what I was going to point out next, that there are some things that we can state as a statement of quality or as a statement of pervasion, and ultimately we're getting at the same thing in some cases, right? So I could say, Gus Cutz is an aspiring Buddhist, right? So that I can say, or I could say, whatever is Gus Cutz is necessarily an aspiring Buddhist. I'm not saying the same thing. I'm making two different claims, but they boil down to the same thing in practice, because whatever is Gus Cutz comes down to Gus Cutz in this case. There's only one, right? So if I say Gus Cutz, then everybody will look at this, at the subject here, is an aspiring Buddhist. That's the predicate I'm saying, fine. And if I say whatever is a Gus Cutz, then people are going to be seeking out through the world to find anything that is a Gus Cutz, and I'm saying anything you find under that, you'll find to be an aspiring Buddhist. And ultimately, you'll only find that there's one and that it is an aspiring Buddhist. Right?
Gotcha. If I don't want to make this complicated, but if you're going to take it further in like a Dharma setting, would one not reply that Gus Cutz ultimately does not exist? Or you can't locate the individual Gus Cutz?
Well, if you want to go there, then I will tell you that no, we can't say that Gus Cutz ultimately does not exist, but we can say that Gus Cutz does not ultimately exist.
Okay, gotcha.
Right?
I have a question, but you can tell me if it doesn't need to be now, it needs to be later. I won't be upset. It's kind of in relation to that which Theo's just said. I was trying to think up ideas by myself of you said to notice predicates and how do they compare, but because I think in concepts and ideas most of the time, I was coming up with things like, well, beauty was an example, but the problem with beauty is that beauty potentially is actually non-existent. But a lot of ideas and concepts could maybe be called non-existent because there is no such thing. But then maybe it comes back to what Theo said, which there's no such thing as inherent beauty because nothing is inherently ugly or beautiful. Because if it were, everybody would think, oh, this is beautiful, and nobody would think it were ugly. And this is where I kind of got caught in a loop of when it becomes conceptual and that things are labeled and they're based on our perceptions, which are different for each person. How does that work? But maybe that's going too far this way.
No, that's a great question. And I'm glad you're asking it because in one sense, I do think that is beyond the stage that we've gotten to, and I think that we all kind of end up getting stuck there at this stage that we're at, if that makes sense. And I think the answer, it's a little bit funny because in one respect, we're learning to think about things in a very different way, right? We're learning to frame things in a very different way. We're kind of learning to limit ourselves to a single use of the word is. We're kind of learning to limit ourselves to, not limit ourselves, but to be very clear when we're using something as a subject or as a predicate and not just kind of switching them around. And in terms of the content of the statements, we actually are going by how things really seem to us. That's the idea, at least, you know. So for example, if somebody said, you know, does beauty exist in the content of a Tibetan debate? I would say yes. I would unhesitatingly say yes. And they would say, oh, it follows that there is something that is beautiful. I'd say yes, you know, and say posit something. And I would say, you know, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And they say it follows that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is beautiful. And I would say yes, right? Now, from there, the debate could go in any number of directions, and the person could try to prove to me that what I'm saying is not so or whatever, but I would unhesitatingly say that, right? Why? Because if somebody asked me, give me an example of something that is beautiful, I would say Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and that's enough, right? If somebody said, you know, give me an example of something that is a person, you know, I could say, you know, Barack Obama, let's say, right? And so therefore I can comfortably say Barack Obama is a person. And it doesn't, in a funny way, it doesn't matter whether I mean like inherently or not inherently, or forever or not forever, like all of the subtle philosophical implications are things that we would figure out as we go, right? But insofar as I consider, like if somebody, you know, didn't know the word person, they said, what's a person? I tried to explain. It's like, can you give me an example? I'd say, yeah, Barack Obama, Marilyn Monroe, me, you know, like, so all of these things I would be able to put in a sentence saying blank is a person, right?
I guess then it depends on what you're debating. So if you're in the level, you know, conventional and ultimate. So if it were a debate on an ultimate topic like emptiness, then yes, it would completely matter. Whereas if we're talking in the conventional sense, which we are most of the time, then yeah, it's the level. Yeah.
No, so let me put it to you this way. No matter what level we were talking about, based on my current understanding of things, here's how I would answer, right? If somebody said, you know, give me an example of, well, if somebody said like Gus is a person, I would say yes. And if somebody said Gus is inherently a person, I would say no. Right? Because if somebody said, give me an example of something that's a person, I'd say Gus. Somebody said, give me an example of something that is inherently a person, I would say, I can't. There isn't anything. Right? So we were being careful, we're being mindful of the words that we're using, what it is that we're claiming, but within that, we're saying things as we understand them. We don't have to kind of think ahead of ourselves and think, but is it ultimately, you know, it's just in the way the question was phrased and the way the question was asked, what would be my answer? Saying that, I will admit, actually, there are a couple of exceptions to that. I have to say, but the exceptions are more about the form of things. So, like, for example, in terms of exceptions, normally we would say, you know, a white horse is white, right? Here we'd be a little bit more careful and we'd say the color of a white horse is white, right? That these things come up in specific places in specific ways, but generally speaking, we're pretty safe. Another one is, I would say, you know, horse is like normally we would say horse is a word. Horse is a 5-letter word, right? In this system, I would say, no. Horse is an animal. The word horse is a 5-letter word, right? So we want to be careful with things like that. But and even if we make a mistake, that's fine. The debate will show it. Right? So let me say a little bit more on these topics. So in terms of subjects, again, subjects come up in statements of qualities, not in statements of pervasion. In statements of pervasion, what comes up are predicates, right? But a subject will always be a singular term. That's the important thing that the chapter is explaining to us. It could be concrete or it could be abstract, but it's a singular term, meaning that even if the subject is a pair of things or a group of things, still the referent is of that pair as a single pair, or of that group as a single group, a collective group, right? We're not talking about the individual items within that pair or the individual items within that group. Okay, so I'll give you guys some examples about that in just a moment. But
I have a question.
yes.
Hi, this is Tammy and Morgan.
Oh, hi, Tammy.
And, hi. When you say the subject is a singular, we're talking statements of quality and statements of pervasion.
Well, in principle, yes, but in statements of pervasion, we're only ever talking about predicates.
Predicates. That's
So,
right, you said that.
so actually, in statements of pervasion, no. In statements of pervasion, no. In statements of pervasion, we're talking about predicates. So we're going to be talking about whatsoever has that predicate. But in statements
Okay,
of, yeah.
Statements of qualities, we're talking about the subject.
Yes.
Subject is singular.
Exactly.
So, okay, given how things are at this point, there seems to be a lot of statements that are made regarding race, religion, nationality, and gender, and so on. So when we're looking at, for example, I heard someone say, Welshes are coal miners.
Mm.
And a lot of people do this, but that's not a correct statement.
No, that's
So
not.
So the error, I know that it can be a statement of pervasion, worked it out that way, but what if it's used, it cannot be used as a statement of quality because it's a group?
Well, it could actually be used either way, and it would be wrong both times.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Like,
yes.
if somebody said it as a statement of pervasion, what they would be saying would be whatever is a Welsh person is necessarily a coal miner, and that's
Exactly.
just not true, right?
Right.
If somebody said it as a statement of qualities, what they would be saying would be, if somebody asked me to give an example of a coal miner so that they could understand what a coal miner is, I would say, oh, a Welsh person. And that's just not true either. That doesn't work.
So you would take that statement, Welshes are coal miners, and you would turn it into singular of give me an example of a coal miner who is.
Welsh is, oh, I'm sorry. Please finish.
Oh, said that wrong. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I think I interrupted you. Could you just finish that thought?
You would turn it around into a singular. Give me an example of a coal miner who is Welsh.
Um, I'm thinking because I'm trying to think about why is my answer no.
I didn't.
I think I don't think I do that because in either case, if somebody says it as a statement of quality, Welsh people are coal miners, right? If somebody says it as a statement of quality like that, then there's no question of an example. There's nothing to exemplify because the subject is the singular thing, Welsh people, right? There's not an example of Welsh people. Welsh people is the subject. If somebody said, whatever is a Welsh person is necessarily a coal miner, then we could ask for an example of something that is a Welsh person, right? We could do that, right?
Yes.
However, I don't think that wouldn't help us very much in proving the mistake, because the mistake that they're making isn't that there exists some example of it. The mistake that they're making is that all Welsh persons are coal miners. So just in practice, like you could, so then you could ask for an example, but in practice, I don't think that would help you terribly much. That would help you more if they said that there's 4 possibilities or 3 possibilities between them.
Right.
See, it's easy, right? It's like so easy. It's like as it's in everybody's face, like, right?
People don't talk that way.
No, people don't talk that way. But it's so important to think that way because people will say silly things like Welsh people are coal miners, and then they will draw implications as if they had said different things depending on which way the argument is going for them. Right? So we want to be clear, even if we're using their language, we want to be clear on what is it that they're actually claiming and what really does follow from that and what doesn't follow from that. One thing I can promise you guys is, as unbelievable as this might sound, when you practice this stuff, it becomes so second nature that you see things this way, right? You still make mistakes sometimes, of course, but like you really see things this way. So I don't want you to think that like this is some like abstruse philosophical concept that maybe you'll never wrap your mind around. And it's to be totally frank, it's one of those things that you forget that other people don't see it that way. And you know, it's
Right. I mean, I understand that when they say that, they've got some other idea in their mind when they're saying that, most
right.
likely. And so how do we get them to bring that out so that they're speaking in a more clear way?
I think on a practical level, I think probably the easiest thing to do would be to just kind of ask them point blank to say like, oh, are you saying that all Welsh people are coal miners? And they'll say no, right? And I mean, hopefully. And then the conversation could kind of develop from there. They can say, oh, so what is it that you mean? You know? And they might say something like, I mean that most Welsh people are coal miners, which hopefully they wouldn't even say that, you know? But then you can bring up the claims that they actually mean. One thing that I'll warn you about, and somewhere in this book, I know Daniel Perdue says this, and this really, really bears out in my experience, is that this really only works for somebody who wants to know the truth. You know, if somebody is coming from an emotional place, or if somebody is just committed to believing something regardless, then you can ask the question a billion ways and they'll just dodge the question, you know?
Right.
And at a certain point from a Buddhist point of view, it actually even becomes idle speech to keep going.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
But if certainly if the person, and and there can be like different levels, I suppose, of willingness, but to whatever extent the person is willing to genuinely figure out what they believe and what the truth is, to that extent, I think you can just kind of ask and get more clarity as you go.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me say a little bit more about the things in this chapter, because again, I think that each of them might be confusing, but when they kind of come together, they kind of clarify each other. So let me go back. So subjects. Okay. The other thing about, okay, so one of the most difficult points in Tibetan debate is to wrap our minds around the concept of an abstract singular subject. This is one of the hardest things for Tibetans too, actually. And I mean, I've thought a lot about what it is that we're actually referring to when we're referring to the abstract singular subject. I have some thoughts, but I think at this point it would just be more confusing. Maybe down the line I can share my thoughts. But some things that we know about singular abstract singular subjects, just for our ease of reference, we know that if any part of it exists, then it as a whole exists. Right? We don't, let's not worry about why right now, but like if I say, President Biden and the current King of France exist, that's true because President Biden exists, and that's enough for now. And we also know that if any part of the subject is permanent, then the subject as a whole is permanent. And again, there's a reason for that, but for now, let's just take those as like rules for the moment. So if I say existing things, existing things as a singular subject is permanent, because existing things, as includes both things that are permanent and things that are not permanent, right? Again, for now, let's just memorize those as rules of thumb. But now getting back into predicates. So a few things. One thing is that in English grammar distinguishes whether the predicate is a noun or an adjective, right? We would say we'd say things in different ways. Like we'd say, this is tall. We would say this is a tall thing, but that's just English grammar though. Tibetan doesn't make that distinction. And in logic, it actually makes no difference. In any kind of logic, really, it makes no difference. So when we say tall, we mean the same thing as when we say a tall thing. When we say famous, we mean the same thing as when we say a famous thing, and thing includes person. When we say impermanent, it means the same thing as impermanent thing. Existent, same thing as existent phenomenon, So we can, to kind of suit our English ears, we can phrase it any which way to fit with the grammar in English. So we can say the Empire State Building is tall, or we can say the Empire State Building is a tall thing. We can say the North Pole isn't existent, or we can say the North Pole is an existent phenomenon. It's fine. It's fine either way, right? Now, how do subjects and predicates relate to each other in a sentence? This is where Dan Perdue brings up the distinction between distributive predication and collective predication, right? You'll never need to know those terms in Tibetan logic. You might need to know them at cocktail parties, but not in Tibetan logic, right? I think these are terms that come from Western philosophy, and I think Dan Perdue introduced them to explain something that is important, but frankly, I think the introduction of them again, is a little bit more complicated than I need it to be. But since we're here, distributive predication is when the predicate is true of each thing individually that the subject refers to. This is the one in statements of pervasion. So for example, whatever is a man is necessarily mortal. So if each and everything that is a man, the predicate is saying that it is mortal. So Socrates is mortal, and Plato is mortal, and Aristotle is mortal, and Alexander the Great is mortal, and Joe Biden is mortal, and I am mortal, right? Whatever is produced is necessarily impermanent. So this is saying if each and everything that is produced, that thing has the predicate of impermanent, right? So sound is impermanent, flowers are impermanent, human beings are impermanent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever is a place that has smoke is necessarily a place that has fire, right? So again, distributive predication, we're saying whatever is a place that has smoke. So anything that has the predicate of has smoke necessarily has the predicate of has fire, right? So if you look over there and there's smoke, so you say, okay, that's a place that has smoke, then I'm saying that's a place that has fire. That's at the very least what the sentence is claiming, right? That's distributive predication. Now, collective predication means that the predicate is true of the subject as a whole. We're not saying that it's true of every part of the subject. We're saying that it's true of the subject as a whole, right? This is the one in statements of qualities. So for example, dog is a species. That doesn't mean that Snoopy is a species, even though Snoopy is a dog. Right? It's not saying that everything that is a dog is a species. It's not saying that. Numbers are first learned in childhood. I think that's a fair thing to say. So like if somebody said, give me an example of something that is first learned in childhood. I'd say numbers. I think that's a fair example, right? So numbers are first learned in childhood, but that doesn't mean that pi, the number pi, is first learned in early childhood. It's not, right? But we never said it was. We didn't say that every number is first learned in childhood. We didn't say that. We said numbers are first learned in childhood. Here's one. British people voted for Brexit. British people voted for Brexit. As I understand it, and maybe I shouldn't have picked this example, I don't know, but as I understand it, that's true. Right? Give me an example of something that voted for Brexit. Well, British people, they voted for Brexit, right? It passed.
That's actually just completely clarified for me the difference between the two of them. So I just could not get my head around it. That's
right?
A very good example.
I'm glad. And my follow-up, because I didn't want to make any assumptions about anybody I know, my follow-up was, that's not saying that David Cameron voted for Brexit, right? And we know Queen Elizabeth II didn't vote for Brexit because we know Queen Elizabeth II doesn't get to vote, as I understand it, right? So, so British people voted for Brexit is true. Whatever is a British person necessarily voted for Brexit is false. Now, because that's too simple, let's get just a little bit more complicated, right? Even if the subject is a pair of things or a group of things, even still, the predicate in a statement of qualities is going to be collective, not distributive, right? Meaning, even still, the predicate is going to be referring to the subject as a whole, not to each thing individually. Examples. A dog and a cat are two different animals, right? Say, give me an example of two different animals. I could say, yeah, a dog and a cat. A dog and a cat are two different animals. But it is not true that a dog is two different animals. And it is not true that a cat is two different animals. We never made a statement about the individual parts that make up the subject. We're making the statement about the subject when taken as a whole. Odnar and Joey make a cute couple. That could be true. That doesn't mean that Odnar makes a cute couple. That doesn't mean that Joey makes a cute couple. In fact, Odnar does not make a cute couple because Odnar does not make a couple. Odnar is just an individual, right? Here's another one. This is also, I made sure that this was true, and it is. Mo, Larry, and Curly have their own star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But it is not true that Mo has his own star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It is not true that Larry has his own star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's not true that Curly has his own star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Thoughts, questions, concerns about this point before we get to something more complicated? Again, the important thing, you don't have to remember collective, you don't have to remember distributive. The important thing to be clear is that when we're saying a statement of quality, whatever the predicate is, we're just applying it to the subject as one thing, right? In fact, we could even go so far as to say whenever there's a subject, the predicate applies to the subject as a whole, as a singular thing. And when we have a statement of pervasion, then we're talking about the predicate of the sentence applies to everything whatsoever, each thing whatsoever that has the first predicate as a quality. Like whatever is snow is necessarily cold, right? Or, yeah. Or whatever is an even number is necessarily a number. Whatever is an even number is necessarily an integer. Whatever is an integer is necessarily a number. That applies to all the integers, whatever is an integer. Okay? Yes. Yes?
If we take an Venn diagram and put this concept into that, it is like predicate is the bigger circle and this one is smaller one, or
That's a great question. Yes. If you're using Venn diagrams, predicates are always going to be circles and subjects are always going to be points.
No, it is like bigger circle or smaller circle, like because that particular reasoning is going to pervade for all the occasions or instances.
Exactly. So if you're making a statement of pervasion, then there are going to be two circles and one is going to be inside the other.
Mm-hmm. So which is the bigger one, which is a smaller one?
If you say whatever is A is necessarily B, then B is the larger one and A is the smaller one.
So predicate is the bigger circle and subject is the smaller one.
No. So sorry. This is where it gets confusing. Well, this gets extra confusing because now we can, in that sentence, sorry, the logical subject is not the same as the grammatical subject. So, in a statement of pervasion, we're talking about logical subjects and logical predicates. We're not talking about grammatical subjects and predicates. So in a statement of pervasion, we're comparing two predicates, right? Whatever is a dog is necessarily an animal. We're taking dog as a predicate and animal as a predicate, and we're saying whatever has the first predicate necessarily has the second predicate. Mm-hmm. So the first predicate is the smaller circle. The second predicate is the larger circle around it. But in a statement of qualities, we're not comparing two predicates. We're comparing a subject. We're relating a subject to a predicate. So the subject is going to be a single point. It's not a circle. There's nothing inside it. It's just itself. And the predicate is going to be a circle around it. So rather than just say it again and again, I'm just really quickly. Can you guys see that?
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Okay.
this says dog is an animal, and this says whatever is a dog is necessarily an animal. Okay, and I can show you the difference really quickly by showing you this. I didn't think I had, so it wasn't big enough, but inside the circle of dog, there's a dot Snoopy, a point Snoopy, right? There's an example of something that is a dog, Snoopy. But here, we can't ask for an example because we're using dog as a point. And when we say dog is an animal, there's no such thing as an example to ask for. We're just saying dog. Dog is it. That's all we're saying, right? Here, we're saying whatever is a dog is necessarily an animal. So you say, well, give me an example of something that is a dog. We could say Snoopy. For those of you who haven't been here, Snoopy is my actual dog.
Would you say Snoopy is a dog? Could you just use that as a
Yes,
qualitative?
I absolutely could. Just ignore the outer circle and that's already there.
So is that then subject and quality? So dog is the subject and animal is the quality. Snoopy is the subject and dog is the quality. Whereas in the pervasion, you have whatever is a dog is also an animal, and that's the two. The dog and animal are the predicates.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Now notice this. If you look at this diagram, if we were to break apart everything it says Snoopy is a dog. It says Snoopy is a mammal. You think about it, right? Because the dot Snoopy, the point Snoopy is inside the circle mammal. It says Snoopy is an animal. All right. It says whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal. It says whatever is a dog is necessarily an animal. And it says whatever is a mammal is necessarily an animal. Right?
Yes.
Now, notice the difference. All of that is true. No matter what I draw next, all of what I just said is still true, right? But notice that we could also draw this. This says a lot less. All this says is that Snoopy is an animal. This says that dog is an animal. This says that mammal is an animal. But here, all of those are subjects with animal as the predicate. Right? What this is saying is that if somebody said, give me an example of animal, I could say Snoopy, or I could say dog, or I could say mammal. All of those are fine examples of animal. This is saying a lot more. Right? This is saying something about each and every dog is a mammal. Each and every dog is an animal. Each and every mammal is an animal. Right? Both of these are fair ways of communicating ideas. Both of these give you true statements, but they're two different kinds of statements. Just to be perfectly clear with one last disclaimer. Here I drew only examples of circles that one is bigger than the other and they're outside each other. But you could also have a statement of pervasion where the two circles are the same size and overlap perfectly. right? So for example, just trying to find a blank part of this. Well, I'll just do it on the bottom here. This is a statement of pervasion that says everything that is a feline is necessarily a cat, and everything that is a cat is necessarily a feline. There's two circles, but they overlap perfectly. It means anything that you put inside the circle for feline will also be inside the circle for cat. Anything that you put inside the circle for cat will also be inside the circle for feline. So the pervasion goes both ways here. Here, when we say, here we're saying that whatever is a mammal is necessarily an animal. That means that anything you put inside the circle for mammal will necessarily also be inside the circle for animal. But it's not true vice versa. You could put something inside the circle for animal, but outside the circle for mammal. Like fish.
But the third circle which you drew now, so I am not sure about that, because if you put everything outside the circle means that should be one subject, not many, isn't it?
Say that one more time.
If you put everything outside the circle, the third one,
this one,
outside circle should have only one subject, isn't it? Like either I don't feel in or cat, not both, isn't it? Because they are two different subjects we are talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you saying that there are things that are one but not the other?
No, we are either talking about the feline or about the cat.
Right. But all that this is saying is that given the conventions of the English language, anything that we would say is a cat is necessarily something that we would also say is a feline.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that we would say is a feline is also something that we would say is a cat. So the two circles overlap perfectly. Here's another. Another example, right? Unmarried man and bachelor. If we're talking about those as predicates, right? We're talking about two circles, but those two circles perfectly overlap. Whatever subject is inside the circle bachelor is also going to be inside the circle unmarried man. Whatever subject is inside the circle unmarried man is also going to be inside the circle bachelor. Yes, Linda?
Tried to reconcile this with the diagrams in chapter 4, which I think weren't comparing predicates, but the concept of mutual inclusion and all that seem really the same.
Those are comparing predicates.
Oh no.
Right, when we talk about how do the two compare, mammal and animal, we're comparing them as predicates. We can only compare things as predicates. In the sense of compare that we use in the sense of the word that we're using in this book.
Okay, because I was thinking of the subject and predicate in the sentence for the debate. And then I was picturing two predicates. I'll think about it more.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't found a way to make it not be confusing. Because again, subject and predicate, there's the grammatical subject and predicate, and there's the semantic or logical subject and predicate. We're talking about in the logical sense, sorry.
It's all right. I'll give it some more thought.
In 100 years, the books about this in English will be crystal clear, but we're still all trying to figure out how to put it into.
I think it's hard to put it clearly in words.
Yes.
What's the difference between predicate and quality? So if predicate's what we're saying about it and subject's what we're talking about, in the case of Snoopy is cute. Cute is then a quality of the subject Snoopy, but is it also a predicate or not?
Here's what I'll say, ready?
Mhm.
In the two, quality and predicate, there are three possibilities. Something that is both is cute, as in Snoopy is cute. That is a quality and that is a predicate. Whatever is a quality is necessarily a predicate. However, it is not the case that whatever is a predicate is necessarily a quality. Ask me to posit an example, and I will. The example is walking, currently walking. Currently walking is a predicate, but in many people's interpretation of the word, they wouldn't say that currently walking is a quality. It's not like an adjective, it's a verb, it's an action. And there is something that is neither. For example, Snoopy in the sentence, Snoopy is cute. That is not a quality in that sentence, and that is not a predicate in that sentence. So in other words, predicate is just a little bit of a more inclusive word. Most of the time, when we're talking about a predicate, I think most of the time we're talking about a quality. But
So is it easier then just to use the word quality in relation to a subject, an adjective for a subject, but use the word predicate when we're talking about comparing things, whatever is this is either this or not, based on the 3P and the mutually inclusive and all that? When we're talking like that, we would say predicate.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's all a matter of the convention that we agree to, right? And it's all a matter of the convention that we agree to. So I think it's just a pragmatic question of what will make it easiest for us. My personal vote off the top of my head would be that it would probably be easier if we think of them as predicate in both cases. Like a statement of quality is really a statement of predication. We're saying like something is a predicate of a subject. A statement of pervasion is a statement about one predicate pervading another predicate, one predicate being included in another predicate, right? Predicate is, again, it's just whatever claim is being made about a subject. So it could be a verb, it could be an adjective, it could be a noun, it could be a, like when I say, my husband is Nick, right? My husband is a subject, Nick is a predicate. But most of us wouldn't think to say Nick is a quality. But we're still talking about the predicate being Nick. How does the two compare? Nick and Gus, we're talking about them as predicates. How does, what can we say about things that are Gus relative to things that are Nick? And we'd say they're mutually exclusive. Whatever is Gus is not Nick. Whatever is Nick is not Gus. Mm. And it's funny, we don't usually think about this, but it's not because this is introducing another layer, like another thing for us to think about. We don't usually think about this, but we go along with this all the time naturally, and we just make mistakes left and right because we're not aware of this distinction. We're not noticing when we're doing one thing versus when we're doing another. And so even though the example I'm going to give you is a mistake that probably nobody would make, people make the exact same type of mistake all the time. Like nobody would say, well, Snoopy is a species because Snoopy is a dog and dog is a species. Nobody would make that mistake probably, but we make mistakes like that all the time. And then we end up with, public policies that are unfortunate, among other things. Okay, one more thing to get out of the way in terms of how subjects and predicates relate to each other is this: if there are multiple predicates in the same sentence, then each of those predicates individually is being predicated on the subject. So for example, if I say, Gus is a man and an American citizen, right? Then I'm saying two things. I'm saying Gus is a man. I'm saying Gus is an American citizen, right? If I say Snoopy is a dog and cute, then I'm saying two things. Snoopy is a dog and Snoopy is cute. Like, if there's multiple predicates, you can break it up into multiple sentences and they should still all hold. If not, there's a mistake. Whether this is true or not, I could say dinosaurs were ferocious and lived a long time ago. Then that means I have to stand by dinosaurs are ferocious, and I have to stand by dinosaurs lived a long time ago, right? Now, if we put all of this together, notice what happens when the subject is a set that contains multiple things, and at the same time, there are multiple predicates, okay? So for example, I could say, Odnar and Joey are co-workers and a cute couple, right? So what am I saying? I'm saying Odnar and Joey, taken as a singular pair, Odnar and Joey are co-workers, and I'm saying Odnar and Joey are a cute couple, right? However, I cannot say Odnar and Joey are boyfriend and girlfriend, or Odnar and Joey are a boyfriend and a girlfriend, because to say that, I would be saying Odnar and Joey are a boyfriend, and I would be saying Odnar and Joey are a girlfriend. And I'm not saying that. It's funny, everybody was with me when I was going on about dinosaurs being ferocious and living a long time ago. The moment I say Odnar and Joey, it goes out there. It's funny, right? Because it's not the way we talk. It's not the way we talk, right? We totally say things like Odnar and Joey are boyfriend and girlfriend, right? We do. And in English, like in casual English, that there's a valid statement there, right? There is even there's a way to say that in Tibetan debate. We just have to go about it in a different way, right? We'd have to say something like Odnar and Joey are a couple consisting of a boyfriend and a girlfriend or something like that. Yes, Linda.
So are you saying we can't have two elements in a subject with two elements in the predicate?
Well, no, we can. We can. Again, Odnar and Joey are co-workers and a cute couple. That's fine. That's fine as long as it's true that Odnar and Joey are co-workers, and as long as it's true that Odnar and Joey are a cute couple.
So both have to relate to I'll think about that one some more.
The subject is always a singular thing. We never break up the subject. I mean, like if we translate it into multiple sentences, each sentence will have the same subject as a set, but the predicates are separate. So Odnar and Joey are coworkers and a cute couple is fine as long as Odnar and Joey are coworkers and as long as Odnar and Joey are a cute couple. The subject is Odnar and Joey, right? But I'm giving you two different predicates, right? Now, Odnar and Joey are boyfriend and girlfriend is not fine because the subject is Odnar and Joey, but I'm giving you two predicates, boyfriend, girlfriend. I can't say Odnar and Joey are boyfriend. Odnar and Joey are a girlfriend. Those just aren't true.
Got it for the moment.
Yeah, okay, so I'll make you unget it again. Ready? Because for the same reason, I cannot say Odnar and Joey are Odnar and Joey. Because Good. Because if I said that, if I said Odnar and Joey are Odnar and Joey, I'd be saying the subject, Odnar and Joey are Odnar. And I'd be saying the subject, Odnar and Joey are Joey.
But you just said Otnar and Joey are Otnar and Joey, right? That's an example of a mistake.
Yes.
Because we're talking because you're talking, okay, so because you're talking about Otnar and Joey, in the first mention is a subject, but in the second mention, it's as two separate predicates, Otnar and Joey. Is that
Exactly.
okay? Gotcha.
Exactly. So here's another one, a table and a chair, right? So the subject is a table and a chair. That's the subject. So we can say a table and a chair are physical and impermanent. We can say that. Why? Because the subject, a table and a chair, are physical. The subject, a table and a chair, are impermanent. Right? We have to keep the subject as it is. Now, we cannot say a table and a chair are a larger piece of furniture and a smaller piece of furniture. Because if we said that, we would be saying the subject, a table and a chair, are a larger piece of furniture. And we'd also be saying the subject, a table and a chair, are a smaller piece of furniture. Right? And lastly, once again, yeah, Theo?
Maybe this is wrong, but I'm just thinking, can I not kind of pair the predicates and say a table and a chair are a table and a chair as one whole thing, and then they would be equivalent?
Yes, there is a way to do that. There is a way to do that. But we'll have to get to that, and we'll have to wait to do that. But when we say a table and a chair or a table and a chair, we need to, again, it's really about just being on the same page in terms of what the sentence means, right? So and I used to think, until recently, I used to think that this was purely a matter of convention. I used to think like, oh, they could have just decided to kind of interpret this the other way. But then I realized that if they did, then there would be certain things that you wouldn't be able to say. This is the only way to set it up so that you can make any statement that you want to make accurately. So the last one, a table and a chair are a table and a chair, right? That is not true, because the subject is a table and a chair. And so for you, if we have two predicates, the claim here is a table and a chair are a table, which isn't true. And a table and a chair are a chair, which isn't true.
So if you go back and you had like a table and chair were physical and a table and chair are impermanent, would you then say that something that's physical is impermanent? Or is that like a whole different?
You can absolutely say that, and that's actually true, but that's a very different claim from the one being made here. That doesn't follow from this.
So you have to find a way to mess with the English, and you'd have to say Odnar and Joey are partners. But even then, you
totally say.
No, you could, but then you'd have to say Joey is a partner rather than partners when you split it, because he isn't partners. He's a partner. So you have to mess with the way you say it.
Yes. In this sense, the Tibetan grammar is a little bit closer to the rules of logic, even as we understand them in the West, in that it doesn't specify, it doesn't have like the definite and indefinite articles or the. It doesn't have plurals and singulars. I mean, they exist, but you don't normally say them, I guess. So English forces us to make grammatical decisions that aren't implicit in the logic. And so for that reason, so Dan Perdue goes to great lengths to try to say, still try to say it in a way that's grammatical in English. But I personally feel that it's easier to do it the other way. Kind of don't worry so much about the grammaticalness of it. Just say the truth of what you mean.
Yeah, I think perfectly it's going to be Odnar and Joey are partnered.
Nice. Nice. And then you can say Joey is partnered and Adnar is partnered. Yes. That's a very elegant way to preserve both the logic and the grammar. But if you have to sacrifice one, sacrifice the grammar every time. Don't sacrifice the logic. Any other questions at this point before I share some more things? Okay, so then the next thing I wanted to emphasize, which relates to what we were just saying about Adnar and Joey and about a chair and a table, and also goes back to what I keep saying about is, right? Is that there's a difference between self-identity and self-exemplification, right? Again, these aren't terms you need to memorize or anything like that. I just want to convey an idea here. Self-identity is the fact that something is identical with itself. And everything is identical with itself. In Western logic, that is sometimes considered to be the fourth law of thought. The fourth or the third? Anyway, a law of thought, meaning like it's not something that we would ever even question if we want to continue to think rationally.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, that everything is identical, anything is identical with itself. Whatever exists, at least, whatever is an existent is necessarily identical with itself, right? So that's self-identity. Self-exemplification, on the other hand, would say that something is an example of itself, and not everything is an example of itself. Some things are, but some things aren't. I can think of some easy examples, but I want to think of an accurate example that will also be easy to understand. I can think of easy examples that are accurate, and I can think of accurate examples that aren't easy. Let me give you an easy example that isn't accurate, okay? So don't write this down because this isn't technically going to be true, but I think it will help you get it. So we could say that word is a word, right? The word word is a word. So from that perspective, we would say that word is an example of itself. If you give me an example of a word, you could say word, right? It's a word itself is an example of word, right? However, anything that is a word, quotes, in quotes, anything that is a word, that isn't an example of a word. Right? That's my easy example. Okay. All right, here's another one. Noun is a noun, but verb is not a verb. Right? Noun is a noun, but verb is also a noun in English. Singular is singular, but plural is not plural. Plural is also singular. Plural is singular. One plural, two plurals. Plurals is plural. Right? So from that point of view, we would say that singular is an example of itself, but plural is not an example of itself. Because give me an example of something that's singular, I could say singular. But if you say, give me an example of something that is plural, I couldn't say plural. That is not an example of something that is plural. So singular is singular, but plural is not plural. However, they are identical, like to themselves. Singular is identical to singular. Plural is identical to plural. Right? And furthermore, they're of course mutually inclusive with themselves. Whatever is singular is necessarily singular, and whatever is plural is necessarily plural.
So whatever is plural is plural, self-identical.
Well, sorry. So there's three things. There's three different distinctions we can make. One is, does it exemplify?
Yep.
Another is it identical with itself?
Mhm.
And another is it mutually inclusive with itself?
Okay.
Right? So everything is identical with itself, and everything is mutually inclusive with itself. But some things are examples of themselves and some things are not.
Sorry, say that last bit again. So everything is identical with itself. Whatever is an existent is necessarily identical to itself and mutually inclusive. Anything that exemplifies itself is not.
No. Careful. That's not it. So I said, so here, let me put it as statements of pervasion. Whatever is an existent necessarily is identical with itself. I'm making that claim. Whatever is an existent necessarily, necessarily is mutually inclusive with itself, he said sheepishly, because it's not, but that's for a specific reason. It's a definition thing, but the idea is the same. However, it is not the case that whatever is an existent is necessarily an example of itself. Some existents are examples of themselves, and some existents are not examples of themselves. For example, singular is an existent that is an example of itself. Plural is an existent that is not an example of itself. Jana? Jana, did you have a...
Remember what I wanted to ask.
Oh, sorry.
Wait, never mind.
Oh, sorry. When you remember, please.
Can I ask a question?
I have a question. You only refer to existence.
Sorry, someone else before me.
Wait.
Does
So,
it also refer to non-existence?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you.
You're only mentioning existence, but what about non-existence?
Non-existence. None of these things would apply to non-exist, meaning a non-existent is not identical with itself. A non-existent is not mutually inclusive with itself. And a non-existent is not like whatever is a non-existent is necessarily not an example of itself. But that's, I mean, I'm just telling you that, but like that's something to be discovered through debate. You know, when you debate this out, you'll come to that. You'll find, oh, yeah, right. So let me mention something else, and I'll show you another example of how to apply this with these. So the concepts, and these are very key concepts. These indeed are very key concepts in Tibetan logic, Tibetan debate, and Buddhist logic. Definition and definiendum. Right? Now we're gonna get to the definitions of these two terms down the line. But for now, I'll just kind of give you a sense of what they are. Okay? So the main idea is that a definiendum is a phenomenon that has certain defining qualities. All right. So yeah, so again, a definiendum is a phenomenon that has certain defining qualities. So for example, a cup, right, is a definiendum. A cup is a phenomenon that has certain defining qualities. In other words, there are certain qualities that I look for to be able to know that this is a cup, right? Like the ability to hold liquid is one of them, at least. A definition is the defining qualities of a certain phenomenon. The defining qualities of a certain phenomenon. So like the definition are the qualities that make something what it is. The definiendum is something that is what it is because of certain characteristics. So when I see this as an object able to hold liquid, I see this as an object able to hold liquid, I'm seeing it in terms of its definition. When I see this as a cup, because it is an object able to hold liquid, so I see it as a cup, I'm seeing it as the definiendum. This is one where if I had a time machine and could go back, I would advise them not to translate these terms as definition and definiendum. Definiendum almost doesn't matter because we don't have a misconception of that word already. But definition, it means something else in English, really.
So should it almost be object and label?
Not exactly object and label, but maybe more I can't think of a shorter way of saying it, but like object picked out based on its unique qualities versus qualities unique to an object that allow you to pick it out.
Description?
I wouldn't say description, because description, usually you think of words to describe something. A description is usually in words, but the definition is not words. The definition is something in the object itself.
Like water is wet.
Exactly. So water is wet. So wet, so let's say moist and wet, if we say that that's the definition of water, right, then it's the actual moistness and the actual wetness on, like in the glass, that is what allows you to know that there's actual water in the glass. So the actual, I have two glasses. The actual moistness and the actual wetness in this glass are the definition that allow me to say there's water, definiendum, in this glass. I know that there's water, definiendum, in this glass because I can tell that there's moistness and wetness, definition, in this glass. Let's try another one. Let's go with one that, I don't know why it feels so dated. It feels somehow almost politically incorrect these days, but I'm making that up. Just bachelor and unmarried man, right? If I see a guy, right, and I want to know whether or not he's a bachelor, what I have to find out is whether or not he's an unmarried man, right? So I have to ascertain the property, the predicate, unmarried man, in that guy. If I ascertain that, thereby, just by virtue of that alone, I've ascertained that he is a bachelor. So the property of being an unmarried man is the definition. It's not the words unmarried man. It's not the words. The fact of being an unmarried man, the property of being an unmarried man is the definition. And being a bachelor is the definiendum. Janet?
Repeat the definition of definiendum, like the other way you would translate it, the way you would have called it.
Oh, definiendum? I think I said something like object that is identified as what it is based on its unique qualities, its unique properties.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So look at this object. Yeah. So once again, look at this object. Wait, you know what? Let's change it up. Why not? Let's well, how the objects around me are boring. Well, here, this is not boring, but at least it's different. Can you guys see that? Okay, I'm not going to say what it is, right? There's something here. And we could, if somebody said, what is Gus holding? There's many valid, correct answers, right? Somebody could say Gus is holding a paperclip. Somebody could say Gus is holding an impermanent phenomenon. Somebody could say Gus is holding a purple thing, right? I'll just leave it there for now, right? So if all of those are valid, right? I hope everybody would agree, and if not, just please play along. But like, let's say it's valid. So it's valid to say Gus is holding a paperclip. It's valid to say Gus is holding an impermanent phenomenon. It's valid to say Gus is holding a purple thing. Now, how do we know that each of them is valid? Right? The way we know is we look for certain characteristics. We look for certain properties that the object in my hand does or does not have. Right? So to ascertain that this is in fact a paperclip, right? You look for certain properties. I couldn't list all of them off the top of my head, but like one of them is like able to hold pieces of paper together. So one of the things you'd be checking for is Gus holding something that is able to hold pieces of paper together? Yeah, okay. Oh, so he's holding a paperclip, right? How do you know that this is an impermanent phenomenon, right? You know, because it's changing moment to moment, like the atoms that make it up don't stay in the same position from one moment to the next. Right. So to be able to say, is Gus holding an impermanent phenomenon? What you'd look for is Gus holding something that's changing from moment to moment? In as much as he is, then yes, he's holding an impermanent phenomenon. Right. To say, is Gus holding a purple thing? Right. You check to see, is Gus holding something such that the color that emanates from it creates the impression of purple or something like that. Right. And in as much as that's true, then yes, then Gus is holding a purple thing. Right? So each of the qualities that you'd look, so if you want to know whether I'm holding a paperclip, you'd look for certain qualities. Those qualities are the definition of paperclip. If you want to know if I'm holding an impermanent phenomenon, you'd look for certain qualities. Those qualities are the definition of impermanent phenomenon. If you want to know whether I'm holding a purple thing, you'd look for certain qualities. Those qualities are the definition of purple thing. And so whatever qualities are the definition of paperclip, relative to those qualities, paperclip is the definiendum. Whatever qualities are the definition of impermanent thing, relative to those qualities, impermanent thing is the definiendum. Whatever qualities are the definition of purple thing, I think is what I haven't said, relative to those qualities, purple thing is the definiendum. In all cases, the definiendum is this thing, is this object in my hand, right? But we can look at it from many different angles. So this thing is the definiendum paperclip. This thing is the definiendum impermanent thing. This thing is the definiendum purple thing, right? Why? Because it has the qualities of each of those things. Jana?
Yeah, forgive me for asking this question, but wouldn't it make more sense to teach first what is a definition and a definiendum before we start comparing how do the two things compare? Like, I'm not quite sure why that precedes this.
Oh, that's
problems with comparison because we haven't defined our object.
right. No, that's a very valid question. And my genuine answer to that is that wherever we start from, we'd raise that question about the other. If we start from comparisons of phenomena, we'd say, well, we couldn't understand this until we understood definition and definiendum, and that's true. And if we started with definition, definiendum, we'd ultimately end up saying, oh, but we couldn't really understand this until we understood comparison of phenomena. And that's true too, right? Because when we get to the actual definition of definition and definiendum, right? When we get to those, we'll see that it involves the fact that they're mutually inclusive. For a
You did
definition,
say that briefly the other day.
say that again.
What
Sorry.
did you say? I wrote it down. Maybe, is this what you meant by definition? You said definition and definiendum. Definition explains what a word means. In Tibetan debate, it means the defining qualities that make something what it is, distinguishing characteristics. Definiendum is the object that has those characteristics.
Yes, except, can you start over again and I'll interrupt you after the first sentence?
Definition explains what a word means.
Stop there. Sorry. That is what the Western use of definition is.
Okay.
That's different from the Tibetan definition.
In Tibetan debate, it means the defining qualities that make something what it is. So definition explains what a word means.
That's that in the Western usage of the term definition, we use that word to refer to explaining what a word means.
In Western usage, okay.
Right? In the Tibetan usage, this is why I would have translated it differently, because unfortunately now we have to have two different understandings of definition in mind. Well, maybe that's not unfortunate. Maybe that helps us broaden our minds and practice taking different perspectives on the same thing.
That's why definition is not a definition.
Well, and that's okay. So that's exactly where I'm getting now, right? So if we think of definiendum as a phenomenon that has certain defining qualities, and we think of definition as the defining qualities of a certain phenomenon, right? It follows that definition is a definiendum. And definition is not a definition. And definiendum is a definiendum. And definiendum is not a definition. But whatever is a definition is necessarily a definition, and whatever is a definition is necessarily not a definiendum, and whatever is a definiendum is necessarily a definiendum, and whatever is a definiendum is necessarily not a definition, right? Right? So let's think about that together. So definition is a definiendum. Definition is an object that has certain qualities that make it what it is. So if we want to know whether something is a definition or not, we'd have to look at certain qualities to establish that. Right? So definition is a definiendum. It's an object that's known to be what it is based on certain qualities that it has. Definition is not a definition. Definition is not a quality that we would look for to discover whether or not something is whatever, right? Likewise, definiendum is an object, right? Definiendum is something that, to know whether something is a definiendum or not, we'd have to look at its qualities, right? So definiendum is a definiendum. So definiendum is not a definition. Definiendum is not a quality that we would seek in something to establish whether it's this or that. Now, so those were all statements of qualities, right? Definition is a definiendum, quality. Definition is not a definition, quality. Definiendum is a definiendum, quality. Definiendum is not a definition, quality, right? Now, what about statements of pervasion? Now, let's think about things that are a definition and things that are a definiendum, right? So here we have to say, whatever is a definition, whatever subject, that subject is a definition, then of course that subject is a definition. We're just repeating ourselves. So whatever is a definition necessarily is a definition. Definition itself as a subject isn't an example of that. But whatever is an example of that necessarily is a definition. And whatever is a definition is necessarily not a definiendum for the same reason, right? Whatever is a quality that establishes what something is necessarily isn't something such that what it is established by a quality. For the same reason, vice versa, whatever is a definiendum is necessarily a definiendum. You know, if you give me an example of something that is definiendum, then I know that that's going to be a definiendum, right? Whatever is a definiendum is necessarily a definiendum. And therefore, whatever is a definiendum is necessarily not a definition, right? And so what we see from this is that definition exemplifies, definiendum exemplifies itself, because definiendum is a definiendum, but definition does not exemplify itself. Definition is not a definition. Yeah, Jenna?
Looking at the Tibetan on page 495, so Sen Ni has a name, is that correct?
Oh, I couldn't, I have to admit, I don't know, like the etymology of it, you mean?
Sen, is that name, Sen?
I don't know. I don't want to misspeak. I don't know.
Mhm.
I'd have to look it up. Sorry. It's a good question though. It's a good question. But all that would tell you though, just to be clear, is the etymology, right? What matters is the definition. Like, well, no, the example would be more confusing than not. Linda?
Did you say whatever is a definidium is necessarily not a definition?
That's right.
Okay.
The two, definiendum and definition, are mutually exclusive.
I could see it if you put definition in quotes or skip the A. I'll think about the rest of it.
What you're saying is that you understand why it's so with the statement of quality, right? But we're talking about a statement of pervasion too.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah. So again, so one way to think about it is you can go around and whatever you look at, you can ask yourself, is this a blank or is this blank, you know? Whatever you're putting in for blank is a definiendum. Because then you'd say, well, how do I know? Well, I know because X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z are the definition. Is this a pen? So pen is the definiendum. Yes. How do I know? Well, I know because it's some kind of, what do you call it, cylindrical object that can be held in the hand that contains ink and allows me to make marks, right? So some version of cylindrical object that can be held in the hand and contains ink that allows me to make marks, some variation of that is the definition that allows me to know that this is a pen. Right? So once we nailed the correct definition, then we would say whatever is a cylindrical object being, you know, whatever the actual correct definition would be, but like whatever is a cylindrical object that can be held in the hand and contains ink that allows me to make marks is necessarily a pen. Whatever is a pen is necessarily a cylindrical object that can be held in the hand and contains ink that allows me to make marks.
Can we go back to, given what you just said, and we go back to paperclip, purple thing, and impermanent thing?
Yes.
It seems to me that although we say that, paperclip is the actual
definiendum.
Whereas, yes, and the other two are not mutually, well, when you look it up in the dictionary, not every definition has impermanent thing, although we know that they are impermanent. But purple thing, it's not mutually inclusive.
Right. So you are right. So paperclip and impermanent phenomenon are not mutually inclusive. Between them, there are three possibilities, right? There's something that is both. This paperclip is a paperclip and it's an impermanent phenomenon. Whatever is a paperclip necessarily is an impermanent phenomenon, but there is something that is an impermanent phenomenon that is not a paperclip, like this glass. And there's something that is neither, like uncomposed space, right? Now, so paperclip and impermanent phenomenon are not mutually inclusive. Likewise, paperclip and purple thing are not mutually inclusive. Between them, there are 4 possibilities, right? Some things are paperclips and purple. Some things are paperclips but not purple. Some things are purple but not paperclips, and some things are neither purple nor paperclips. So they're not mutually inclusive, right? An impermanent thing and purple thing are also not mutually inclusive, right? Between them, there are also 3 possibilities. Whatever is a purple thing is necessarily impermanent, but whatever is impermanent is not necessarily a purple thing, like this glass, which is impermanent, but is not a purple thing, right? So all of that is to say that your point is right, that irrespective of what I'm holding in my hand, paperclip, impermanent phenomenon, and purple thing are not mutually inclusive. We can't just exchange them willy-nilly. However, from the point of view that I'm holding in my hand a paperclip, right? From that point of view, this object is the definiendum paperclip. And we know it because it has the definition of a paperclip. From the point of view that I'm holding in my hand right now, it just so happens that right now I'm holding in my hand an impermanent phenomenon. From that point of view, this object is the definiendum of impermanent phenomenon. And this object also is the definition of impermanent phenomenon, right? The qualities in here, here, and here, here.
Paperclip?
So
Paperclip?
it's not that paperclip is the definiendum of, let's just say paperclip and purple thing. It's just easier for me to say those words. It's not that paperclip is the definiendum of purple thing. No. It's not that purple thing is the definiendum of paperclip. No. Right? This here is the definiendum of paperclip. Right? Furthermore, this here is the definiendum of a purple thing. Definiendum is not the word. It's that we're not making any statements of pervasion here. We're just saying that what I have in my hand is the definiendum of purple thing, meaning what I have in my hand is a purple thing, which can be known to be a purple thing because it has the definition of purple thing.
Okay, so that's why earlier, and I thought this too, label an object. We can't really do that because it's not a word.
Right. Exactly.
We've got a definition and then some new thing we're learning.
Yes, definiendum is
not a word.
Yeah. In both cases, we're actually talking about this. In all cases, this is the definiendum of paperclip, and this is also the definition of paperclip, right?
The paperclip.
This object in my hand.
Yes.
This object in my hand. Now, just to be clear, this object in my hand is also the definiendum of paperclip and the definition of paperclip, right? In each of my hands, I hold the definiendum of paperclip. In each of my hands, I hold the definition of paperclip, right?
Yes.
However, here I have the definiendum of purple thing and the definition of purple thing. Here, I do not have the definiendum of purple thing or the definition of purple thing.
Correct.
Right?
Okay.
So
now we have 3 of them.
Sorry?
Now we have 3 definiendums describing the same object.
Yes, I gave you 3, but we could give an infinite number. This is the definiendum of paperclip. This is the definiendum of impermanent phenomenon. This is the definiendum of purple thing. This is the definiendum of visible thing. This is the definiendum of existent. This is the definiendum of something that can be bent. How do I know? Because look, it has the definition. Right?
All right.
Thank you.
This will come. This will come with time. So what I'd like to ask you guys to do for the coming week is to keep reviewing chapter 5 in light of the things we're saying. Like, or review it once again, keep going through it. And to practice the exercises, if you can check in and do it with a debate partner, all the better. But if not, by yourself. And keep practicing playing around with these concepts. And we can talk about questions that come up next time. And yeah, and this will come with time. This will click with time for sure. All right. Okay, so let's end by dedicating, which just means we think about everything each of us individually, everything we've done in the last 2 hours has an impact on the mind, has some type of influence, effect, whatever on the mind. And so we think, may this impact move the mind in ways that will make it more and more open and more sincere in its motivation to be of help to all benefit, to help and benefit to all sentient beings, and move the mind in ways that will make it more and more clear on how things are, on what things are, how they exist, how they work, so that we can be of best possible benefit to all sentient beings. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, guys, thank you very much. I hope you have a good week. Look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thank you. I'm going to miss you all, but
Thank
I'll
you.
get in touch when I come back.